business person saw this logo, how are you feeling about that? Like if Oprah landed on your website, does that make you want to go hide under the desk? Or does that make you want to celebrate?
How do we go about starting to think about creating and expanding our brand aesthetics, like our colors, our logos, and have that be cohesive across all of those products that we have without feeling like we have the same, colors and the logo looks kind of the same but similar across, an agency maybe, and then you are adding revenue streams with a course, or something like that.
I think I found that entrepreneurs, we kind of like to step first and then look back at how it's being perceived and how it's looking. So a lot of people that I work with, like they already have all of these pieces, but they're starting to realize it's not as cohesive as they wish. And that's kind of when you have to stop and like do a sort of clean house of all of your assets and be like, does this actually fit? But I think most importantly, it's having a roadmap. So I always call it a style guide. And when I was working at agencies, we would always have the printed style guide on our desk. So it's really important for every person I create a style guide for, I send a printed copy so that they can actually set it on their desk and always refer to it when they're making graphics. And I think a cool trick that I've learned for keeping it like a little spicy and not getting bland, because some people get a little tired of like two colors,
Mm-hmm.
is definitely having like a main color palette and then a secondary color palette.
Mm.
Or, I mean, if you're a one-on-one service provider, but you also have courses, maybe
Mm-hmm.
having a different palette for the courses section. So if you're talking about those, maybe they're, brighter hues, or they have a certain texture if the course is a part of that material. But always, I mean, consistency is key. And if you think about it, like all the big names and stuff, they are consistent with it. You know that logo. Like even my little one, she's 4 now, crazy, but uh, she can recognize, oh, that's Lucky Charms, or she knows the big
Mm-hmm.
brands. And that's because of that consistency. They're building brand recognition, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to do the same thing, even as an individual. So
Mm-hmm.
people remember, respect, and learn to love your brand. So it's like if it's printed and in your face of like this thing already exists, my brand is a real, legit, awesome thing, then like you're just showing up and living it versus like, oh, it's this thing I've sort of fallen into after all these years of
Mm.
creating whatever. It's like, no, it's solidified, it's an embodied, amazing thing. And we're just going to show up and make it happen and match that. There's a lot of things that you can do in Illustrator or in other Adobe programs that can't be recreated in Canva. And I think like as a designer and as an artist, that really frustrated me. Like I don't want to be hindered by the program.
How do we create that custom feel without feeling like we have to rebrand our entire business? If we're just wanting, let's say, a sales page or a landing page, how do we create that custom feel without going, gung ho, rebranding the entire thing?
Yeah, well, you definitely, I mean, if you already have your palette and your brand assets established, then it's literally just translating that into the different mediums. For people in that situation, I typically suggest they go on Squarespace. That's like my number one.
Hmm.
Most of my clients, that's the perfect solution for them. And that's because it is so easy for them to handle on the back end. They don't need to hire a web person every month to change things. Yeah, and I think there's a way that you can create your images so they're supplements to your content versus your content relies solely on the images. I always include in the style guide, like I call them brand vibes, but it's literally like the adjectives that describe how it's going to make people feel.
Hmm.
So they're a little more fluid. It's definitely hard to step out of your box and be like, okay, I may love the color pink, but I am working mostly with men. Maybe I shouldn't use pink. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a line there of like, keep it in check. Yes, it still should be personal, especially if you are the face of your brand. Like, that is key that you connect with it and feel good about sharing it. But it's definitely most important you consider those people and how it's going to impact them at the drawing board.
Mm-hmm. If we're starting to revisit our website, what are the top 3 pages that you would recommend us start to focus on?
Number one, homepage, definitely. I mean, people, it's literally like the front door of your house, you know, it's the first thing people are going to see. It decides whether or not they're going to spend any time on this site, and it better wow them or get their attention. Most importantly, get them somewhere else on the site.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
It's really important, like we mentioned before, to step out. I mean, this is your baby, right? Like, you know the ins and outs of your business. But if you give it to some random person, they might not even be able to read the logo if you picked a crazy font. But it's like, you already know the name back and forth, no problem. But if it's not being read or it's not legible or something, like that's a huge red flag that you need to fix. So